Venezuela's parliament, which is dominated by the opposition, has rejected the sacking of the chief prosecutor by the country's new constituent assembly. Parliamentarians say they only recognise Luisa Ortega in the post. She claims she lost her job because the government wanted to stop her investigations into allegations of corruption and human rights abuses. Meanwhile, hackers have targeted Venezuelan government websites, including portals for President Maduro's office, the Supreme Court and the legislature. A group calling itself the Binary Guardians has claimed responsibility for posting anti-government slogans on website homepages and support for opposition groups. Still now to Mark Weisbrot, co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Mark, I know you've been following the situation in Venezuela closely. Clearly, the internet another front in this conflict.
Well, I think it is definitely, and it's unfortunate they attacked the website of the Electoral Commission because that's got important information for anybody who cares about democracy. But I think that the bigger threat is the violence, the violence of the protests. And you see these people calling for rebellion. In fact, Leopoldo Lopez called for a military rebellion right before he was taken back to jail, and then of course he was released back to house arrest. And so I think that's the real danger. There could be a civil war because it's a very polarized country, and I think that's why you really need negotiations, dialogue and negotiations to get out of this mess.
Well, what chance of that? The opposition is calling for nationwide protests on Tuesday. Do you think that inevitably means more violence, or is there possible movement in another direction?
Well, you do see, for example, the same division within the opposition that you've had in most of the last 15 years. You have leaders like Henry Falcón and Ramos Alup, two of the biggest opposition parties. They said they would participate in the regional elections, whereas the more hardline opposition is boycotting. So again, and this is where I think the Trump administration plays a terrible role, because they have committed openly, the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, has committed openly to regime change, to forcing Maduro to resign, he said. And so that supports the hardline opposition that really doesn't want to have negotiation, doesn't want a peaceful or electoral solution. They just want to overthrow the government. And that's where the U.S. plays a terrible role. And also the sanctions, the sanctions that the U.S. government has imposed have already had an effect because for several reasons. One, they're threatening worse sanctions that could destroy the economy. And so already people are, pulling money out on that basis. You saw the black market value of the currency fell by 45% in just 4 days. And this is the sanctions and the threat of further sanctions. Nobody wants to loan money. In fact, they may not even be able to sign contracts with the state oil company because you have some of the officials that have to sign them are on the sanctions list. That is, they're not allowed to deal with the U.S. financial system. So this is a real attempt on the part of the U.S. to further destroy an economy which is already a wreck and to force the government out of power. And again, that reinforces the polarization and reinforces the hard line of the opposition that wants to overthrow the government now.
Mark, thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you.